What's needed is complete separation. France has got to get out of Africa, really, honestly. Enough is enough.
French colonial legacy is very bad. And I think most of the former French colonies, in most of those countries, they don't have any love for France.
Macron needs to exit Africa.
C'est bien comme ça.
The call seems to be France get out of Africa. It's a rising call. And I don't think France or Macron, who's the president, can ever run away from this. Ambassador Chihombori has recently said that the writing is on the wall. But is the French President Macron getting that message? The Niger coup clearly could be the tipping point that will eventually get France out of Africa, get France and its CFA franc out of Africa, and get the French state from meddling in African state affairs.
And I would want to ask the same people who are sitting at the table having those discussions about having a military intervention in Niger. Let me remind you that there are other coups that we are not talking about, that we should be talking about. By France forcing Niger to send all its natural resources to France, that's a coup. By France having its own military in Niger and forcing Nigerians that you can only be trained by France, that is a coup. By forcing Niger to deposit 50% of its reserves with France, that is a coup. The question I have for those who are sitting on the table, during those ECOWAS meetings, during those AU peace and security meetings, what have you done about those coups? Take those 3 coups, multiply by 14, because that's what's happening in the 14 former French colonies. Those are deadly coups that have been taking place for decades. And you, ECOWAS, have done nothing about those coups. I need them to also answer and give us remedy as to how they are going to handle those coups. Make no mistake about it. Those are coups against the African citizens in those countries. And while they discuss what they would like to do with Niger, I would also want them to table those coups and come up with a solution as to what needs to be done. Because behind those coups that I just described from France, there are millions of children who are dying from starvation. There are millions of children who are going to bed with an empty stomach. There are millions of African youth who are unemployed. There are millions of women who are dying while giving birth to another life. I need them to put that on the table as well. If their interests are truly about the Africans, let's look at the global view of the issue. Let's have a bird's eye view of the issue and have a frank and fair and honest discussion about what is really going on in Africa.
The former ambassador of Africa Union to the United States, Ambassador Chihombori, has been one resolute voice in drumming up African support for the French to leave the continent. And she specifically raised the issue of the subjugation of the 14 West African states who have suffered under the French policy, France Afrique, which has ensured that France has maintained a chokehold of these West African states, especially through its CFA currency.
To take $500 billion out of Africa, I mean, it is insanity of the highest order. In countries that are supposedly poor, and making those countries fund French education, French healthcare system, create jobs for French youth while we are struggling in our country. It's no longer sustainable. President Macron needs to wake up and smell the coffee.
Ambassador Chihombori's sentiments actually align with those of Burkina Faso's military leader, Ibrahim Traore, one of the youngest presidents in the world today at just 35, who took the reins of power in a bloodless coup. And they're saying, we intend on running our affairs according to the dictates of our own citizens, the power of the sovereign. That is what they're invoking in this process. And Ibrahim Traore, at the recent Russia-Africa summit, raised very loudly, the question about Africa begging in the West, while Africa is resource-rich, sun that can give us enough solar power. Africa has got mineral resources below the soil. Africa has got the youngest population in the world today, a majority of whom are running away to the west, drowning in the Mediterranean, trying to reach greener pastures based on the wrong decisions that have been taken by leaders in Africa. And they are essentially saying that they are aware of the real raw potential of Africa, African states. And it is time that African leaders get a hold of the reins of power and manage their affairs in a much better system that does not play to the whims of the West. And the center powers are not necessarily their citizens, but those who run those states and work in cahoots with African leaders who also mismanage the affairs of the African countries. This has been the crux of the matter for the longest time. And the word is out. It cannot be business as usual in Africa anymore.
It's not quite clear to me how come that Africa that has so many resources, water, solar energy, how come that currently it is the poorest continent in the world with the highest levels of famine? How come that we have to ask for help? We ask ourselves, but we don't get any answers. I would like to convey a message to the heads of African states.
Qui ne connaissent pas la guerre, l'autosuffisance alimentaire de nos peuples. Nous devons prendre l'expérience de ceux qui ont pu déjà atteindre cela en Afrique, tisser de bonnes relations ici et tisser de meilleures relations avec la Fédération de Russie pour pouvoir assouvir les besoins de nos populations.
Clearly, France, like Ambassador Chihombori says, the writing has been on the wall for the longest time, and France has been running away from this. I think what's happening is you can run, but you can't hide. Let's hear it from you guys. Have a debate on this matter, because the subjugation of these African states needs to end, and Africa is saying they want to control their own affairs. Do you think the coup in Niger is the final blow to what France has been doing in Africa? Is this the right decision to have Niger and the rest of Africa run their own affairs as sovereign states? Let's have a debate. If you're here for the first time, again, it's always a pleasure to have you. Please do subscribe and ring that bell. In the meantime, it's thank you for watching, and we'll see you again on the other side. Salute.